Hi everyone. I want to talk today about trauma. So, trauma is a tricky place because we all have our own experiences and our own interpretations of what trauma is. But just to get started, I'll just tell you this that I'm a student of Dr. Gabor Mate and also of Irene Lyon. And I will just show you a few of the books that I've read that I've thought were great. The Body Keeps Score, Scared Sick, Waking the Tiger. That was actually one of my favorite books to read when I first started to get into trauma, by Peter Levine. And one of the key things about trauma is that trauma gets stored in our bodies. So there is the experience and the mental experience of whatever happened to us and the sort of the story of what happened, right? There's that piece of it. But then there's something else that happens inside of our bodies. And my own personal experience of this has been that it has been in the reconnection to my body and the reconnection to myself and my feelings that has been where my healing has come. So there are different types of trauma that are out there, okay? So I'm not even going to get into probably every nuanced thing, but many people think of trauma and we hear it with a PTSD, which is trauma that we usually refer to as something that happens like either think about things like war, a car accident, some type of traumatic sexual assault. That's usually when we start to think, okay, that's PTSD, and that's maybe the clinical definition. There's also C-PTSD, which is complex post-traumatic stress syndrome, and that's usually when something's been happening over a period of time. So like if you live in an abusive home and you're abused over and over again, or if you experience neglect, or even when you have smaller traumas but they happen over and over again, those types of things create complex post-traumatic stress syndrome. And then we also just have the run-of-the-mill, what people call little t traumas. Those are things that happen to us that are, think about them as like little relational traumas, little disruptions where we take things personally, where our parents did one thing and then we interpreted it in a certain way. And it's usually attachment and relational trauma oriented. And that happens a lot in our childhood because we don't understand. So we just when our parents don't do something that we're hoping that they would do, we believe that it's about us. We make it about us. And so it's natural that we would have a bunch of things from our childhood that are traumatic, that weren't even our parents doing things on purpose. It was not that they were trying to hurt us. And then we have also the collective trauma. And the collective trauma is like all the traumas kind of that all of us experience, but also this sort of way that it has like a life of its own. So what is happening right now in coronavirus times is that a lot of our traumas are being resurfaced, being triggered and activated. So we have traumas on a collective level, but we also have a bunch of little traumas that are being activated, the traumas that are relational, the ones where we didn't feel accepted and loved for who we are, where we felt disconnected or we felt alone. And those types of traumas are coming up over and over again for people. And so what's happening is present day things are causing us to remember in some way our past. And one of the challenges that we face with this is that if we don't understand how trauma works, we can then just believe that like the present day is unbearable. When actually what's happening is the present day situation is reminding us to look inside at the past, to look at things that have happened in our past. And what Dr. Gabor Mate talks about that I think has probably been the most spot on description of how this works, for the moment, I'll speak for me, but I mean, he has worked with countless people that he has brought through this process, that he is just 100% convinced that across the board, this is the case, that the traumatic experience that happens, yes, there are thoughts and interpretations and ideas that we have about what happened that we can totally see, like that was something that was bad and wrong. But the deepest pain we experience is that the thing that happened, that traumatic experience, caused us to cut ourselves off from our body, from our feelings, from our experience of our essence, our truth. And some people might call that disassociation or dissociation. Like, I know for me, that's what I experienced for a long time. I experienced a numbness of my feelings and dissociation. And I really couldn't tap into it. And so it wasn't until I did somatic body work, and I also did a whole bunch of other healing modalities, that I was able to begin to connect to me, to like kind of who I really am, to the feelings that are in my body, to the feelings that arise up in me. I was detached from that. So I was this kind of happy, smiley person, but I wasn't really embracing all of me. I was only embracing those happy, smiley parts of me. But then when I got then I would get triggered by present day situations, and I'd get really angry, and I had a lot of strong reactions to it. And it wasn't until I began to understand that the present day triggers were just pointing me back to these past situations and asking me to heal them. And it was in that healing where I reclaimed connection to myself. And that was where the healing came. So if you find yourself right now experiencing some of these things, my invitation to you is to get some support. That's what I would say to do, is get some support. Like, maybe you have a therapist or a counselor that you can tap into and do some work around this. Try to find somebody who is trauma informed and understands how to work with trauma. Because what we really need is to do the healing. We need to connect to ourselves. And so you can work with somatic experiencing therapists and coaches. There are people that you can work with that are around attachment theory. That's another really great space to work in, is in attachment. In fact, there is somebody that I'm going to put a link to, and I'm having a hard time remembering her first name, but I think her last two names are Poole Heller. And or read books about trauma and try to educate yourself about what's happening, because there is a pathway through. And the pathway through does start with feeling our feelings. It starts with feeling our body sensations. That's actually the beginning of it. So if you notice yourself being triggered, remember that the trigger is just not just in a patronizing way, but just pointing you to the past. It's pointing to something that happened in the past, and it's your indicator that says it's okay now to go back and heal those past wounds and to reconnect to the feelings that you were unable to feel when you were little because it wasn't safe. And that's my invitation to you, is to not ignore this in this time, rather to seek to go into those places of you in a safe way with coaches and trained professionals who can guide you through that. Another person I want to recommend that you check out is Irene Lyon. She's really great. I referred to her in another video of mine about nervous system regulation. She's also another excellent person to follow and to pursue if you really want to do deep trauma work. I'm here introducing you to trauma work from my perspective, not because I am a trauma healing professional. So please make sure that you work with the people who do know what they're doing in this, so that you get the best care you can get. But just know that there is a way through, and that most of the people I bring on this show are people who have experienced trauma and have found their way through. And most of these people, what they have discovered is that it is in this deep connection with themselves, with their feelings, with their own experience, with the truth of who they are. That is the healing, but it's not just simple. It's not just like snap your fingers and you get it, but it is available to all of us. So thanks.